All right, it's great to have everybody this evening. Welcome back for Wednesday night Bible study. As we spend some time together this evening in worship, I'm going to invite Greg and I think Miss Vicky to come up and lead us.
Oh, good warm Wednesday evening to everybody. Let's get your hymnals turned to number 501. Jesus, my Lord, will love me forever. From him no power of evil can sever. He gave his life to ransom my soul. Now I belong to him. Now I belong to Jesus. Jesus belongs to me, not for the years of time alone, but for eternity. Once I was lost in sin's degradation. Jesus came down to bring me salvation, lifted me up from sorrow and shame. Now I belong to him. Now I belong to Jesus. Jesus belongs to me, not for the years of time alone, but for eternity. Joy floods my soul, for Jesus has saved me, freed me from sin that long had enslaved me. His precious blood he gave to redeem. Now I belong to him. Now I belong to Jesus. Jesus belongs to me, not for the years of time alone, but for eternity. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you for leading us in that. And it's great to have Greg up here leading us again as he's been dealing with some blood clots in his legs, but glad you could stand up here and not fall. So, yeah. As we go to the Lord in prayer this evening, does anyone have any specific prayer requests you'd like to mention? Miss Tina? Okay. Tina's having some tests on Friday. As Barbara, and she's still been recovering, but she still makes it out for our Sunday morning services. She's there for the second service normally. So, okay. Someone asked me for an update on Matt Holcomb. That's the young man who taught for me one Wednesday night, and he feels great. That being said, there are some concerns having to do with his heart, and then also some appears to be hemorrhaging that has taken place on his brain, and he has been released from the hospital, but they are referring him to Duke University Hospital. When he was young, he had cancer, and they're just wanting to make sure there's no reoccurrence of anything that's been taking place.
Pastor, a very fine pastor that I worked with in the south coast of this
So that's the Rainey family. So pray for them as they deal with the loss of a husband and a father. And of course, there were many that he probably ministered to, and I'm sure that there are others that are grieving as well. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Pray for all of the unrest that seems to be happening in the world right now, and even here in the United States. Okay. We've got some others who have had some tests going on and had some good results from some, and others who still have some things coming up. So just be in prayer for them. And there's a family that's dealing with cancer. The husband and wife, neither of them know the Lord. And I've been asked just to pray for them as well. All right, Pastor Wiggins, would you mind leading us in prayer? Thank you for leading us, Pastor Wiggins. Let me take care of a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, Pastor Wiggins mentioned that this week there is a youth camp that's taking place up at Table Rock, and I was up there on Monday night, and I am glad to tell you that there were dozens of young people who surrendered their lives to Christ on Monday evening. So just continue to pray for them. They've got different speakers each night. This week they are using senior pastors who are coming in and sharing, and I couldn't tell you who's sharing tonight, but I just encourage you to continue to pray for those kids because there are decisions that need to be made, and I believe God's still going to do great things in and through them. Also want to mention that tomorrow there is a BYF event that will be taking place, and if you're planning on going, the bus is leaving at 10:30, so not at 10:35, not at 10:31 or 10:32. So if you're going, please do everything you can to be here on time. I do believe it's going to be a really good sized group. I was talking with Pastor Lee earlier, and we actually have both buses that will be available, and I think will be used for tomorrow, which means you got a bunch of people that are planning on coming. So the air conditioning was working today, I can tell you that, and hopefully it will all be working for you again tomorrow. So, although it's supposed to be much cooler tomorrow, I think Keith said it's only supposed to be 92 tomorrow. So that'd be much, much better. So, and then one last thing, next Wednesday night we will have our adult Bible study that'll take place. But the following Wednesday night is the first night of family camp. And during family camp, we don't do Wednesday night or Sunday night service. So next week, still plan on coming back for adult Bible study. But the following Wednesday night, we'll be up at Table Rock for our family camp. So I appreciate everybody wanting to be here. I promise you're not going to miss anything, because what we're going to do is after family camp's over, we'll jump back in and we'll continue with the series just like we have before. So those are my three announcement things. One was an update regarding prayer, something you guys are praying for. The other two are things that are coming up in the near future. So tonight we're going to move away from Samson. It seems hard to believe because it took us three sessions to be able to cover Samson's ministry and his role. So as we do tonight, we're going to be in chapters 17 and 18. I did not see any way for me to just cover one of those two chapters, so we're going to group them together tonight, and we're going to look at chapters 17 and 18. That being said, I think we can still get done in our normal timetable tonight without having to go extremely long. Before we get into chapter 17, though, I want to point out that this is a transition point that takes place in the book of Judges. There is, throughout the first 16 chapters, there are repeated examples of judges who rise up and basically rescue the people of Israel. And typically the Holy Spirit comes upon them, empowers them to do a great thing, and they rescue the people of God and then point them back to the Lord. And then this cycle begins all over again, where the people are faithful for a time and then they turn away and they compromise, and then there's oppression that comes as a result of it, and again they need a judge to come in. Well, at this point, we begin to transition away from the judges, even though we're still in the book of Judges, and we begin moving toward the need for kings. And there is value in this transition. I will tell you that even as we look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see that there is great value for a spirit-led leader who will take the people and sometimes rescue the people and sometimes settle disputes among the people. But there is incredible value and expectation that we will not only be spirit-led, but we will be obedient in the way we serve the Lord. And the reality is, and we'll see it repeated twice in tonight's passage, often when there was no king, it seemed as if people lost their motivation for obedience. They didn't have someone to hold them accountable, to tell them that what they're doing is wrong, and therefore they would just simply do whatever it is that they felt was acceptable. I will tell you that as I was preparing for tonight, one of the commentaries that I was reading, which was not a Wesleyan commentary, but one of the things that it brought up was John Wesley and his teaching specifically on the call to holiness, because God is not content just having a people who are familiar with the presence of the Holy Spirit, but rather God desires that his people walk in obedience. In the book of 1 John, we are told basically, if you love me, you will obey what I have commanded. And there is a very clear expectation that we will do more than just be Spirit-led, but we will be obedient in the way we live our Christian life. So this is kind of where the transition takes place. Now, I will give you a heads up that it is likely that what we are reading is not in chronological order. It's not like we just went through this whole story of Samson and now all of a sudden we're going to start transitioning to Kings as opposed to Judges. It is possible that some of what we read beginning here in chapter 17 may have begun to take place as early as just a few years after Joshua has led the people of Israel. If you go back to Judges, it actually talks about a time when basically a generation dies out. Joshua's generation dies out, and then the people began to walk in disobedience. And it is likely that what we are reading here in chapter 17 could have begun to take place as early as that first generation dying out, and suddenly the people begin to allow different types of compromise. So that's just kind of background information for you this evening. I want to read the first 6 verses to you tonight of chapter 17. Again, Judges chapter 17, this is the first 6 verses, and this is what it says. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Now this man, Micah, had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about this event that is just being described. It's kind of just starting here in this passage. Again, remember, this is likely after the time where Joshua has led the people of Israel, and there's been a season where people have still walked in obedience. Remember, all the way back in Joshua 24, he challenged the people, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." And they determined that they would follow the Lord, and for a generation it seemed to happen. But now you begin to run into individuals who are beginning to allow different types of compromise. The first thing that we are introduced to here tonight is a thieving son. Now, my first thought when I think of a thieving son is maybe there was a child that took money that didn't belong to him. He stumbled across mom's money, her savings, and he thought to himself, "You know what, I'll just take that and I'll go out and buy candy," or whatever else it was. For 1,100 pieces of silver, it was probably a lot of candy. That's my first thought. But actually, if you read more closely to what this passage says, it says there was a man named Micah, which means this was not a young child who makes this decision, but rather this was a grown adult. In fact, later in the passage, it will actually mention one of his own sons, which suggests to us that he is not only a grown adult, but he has likely been an adult for a while, as he already has grown sons as well. So we look at this, and the first thing that I would point out is this man is morally corrupt. I hate to tell you this, and it's not always the case, often moral corruption does not begin with that younger generation, but it is often what has been taught from the previous generation. Now, I know you can do everything right as a parent, and it is still possible that your children might choose to walk in disobedience to the Lord. It is not typical. In fact, the book of Proverbs tells us, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I will tell you that if, as parents, we raise our children in a godly manner, there is a very strong likelihood that they will walk in a path that honors the Lord. This man does not. And the first thought is that perhaps he has not been raised in a godly fashion. Actually, we are going to see plenty of ungodliness even from his mother in this passage, which means that is probably pretty accurate. This man is morally corrupt, but it didn't begin with him. It began with the previous generation. Actually, as a part of what he does, obviously, he has coveted something that did not belong to him. That is actually a violation of one of the 10 commandments. He has stolen something that did not belong to him. God would not be pleased. But in doing so, he also dishonors his mother. And of course, we know that this is the commandment that comes with a promise to honor your mother and father so that your days on the earth may be long. Basically, there is a promise of blessing if you do this. And this young man by the name of Micah has not only coveted, but he has also broken the commandment to honor his mother. As a result of this young man stealing 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother, she becomes angry. She announces a curse that is against whoever it is who has stolen these 1,100 pieces of silver. And I don't believe that this is entirely random, that she just happened to announce the curse in his presence, although there may have been 30 other people standing there, and she's thinking to herself, I don't know which one of y'all did it, but I want you to be cursed for what you did. In that moment, there is a revelation that the mother has a love of money. We already know the son does, right? Because he just stole 1,100 pieces of silver that belonged to the mom. But I would suggest to you that this also reveals that there is a love of money that is an issue for the mom. I was watching a documentary last night, and it was talking about an individual, and it was interviewing a lady who she had been taken advantage of by someone who had scammed her out of more than $20,000. And I don't know about you, but that might hurt my feelings just a little bit. I may not be okay with it. I was so impressed with the response of the lady who had been scammed out of more than $20,000. She said, I pray for her. I pray for this individual who has done this thing. It's a very different response from what you get here from the mom who basically lays out a curse to the one who has stolen her money. What that tells me is this mom is very much connected to that money. And that 1,100 pieces of silver, it meant something. Now, it may be that she's worked very hard to earn that 1,100 pieces of silver. It may be that she has saved up constantly over the last however many decades, trying to pinch pennies here and there so she could have it, maybe to even be able to give to her son somewhere down the road. Whatever it was, she's angry to the point that she is basically giving a curse to whoever it is who has stolen that money. There's no grace. There's no mercy to the one who did it. There's no praying for the individual other than I hope they get what they deserve. What that tells me is this woman loved money more than she was concerned about who may have taken it. It may have been that the person who had taken it had done so in such a manner that basically they were ashamed and they were in great need, but there's no concern about that. You took something that didn't belong to you. Now, by the way, If you need something bad enough, typically if you ask, you may find generosity. And I imagine this young man, if he really needed to, he could have went to his mom and said, you know what, Mom, I need some money. And she more than likely would have given it. But there is a love of money that both of them are struggling with. And y'all know that the Lord will talk about the fact that not that money is the root of all evil, but the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, there is a response that the young man gives. Mom issues this curse, and she's announced that she's upset, and I've worked really hard for this money, and now it's gone. And this young man responds. I say young man, again, he is likely an adult. And he basically says, Mom, I'm the one who did it. I took the 1,100 pieces of silver. It's not because of the fact that he likely had hurt Mom's feelings. It's not because of the fact that he was convicted of actually dishonoring his mother. It is because she issued a curse. In fact, he mentions it even in his address to her that, when you mentioned that curse, I'm actually the one who took the money. And here it is. He was fearful that this curse would actually come true. I will say that there is one admirable trait within these first two verses that we see within this young man. It's the only positive thing that I see in what he does, and that is he offers restitution. That's something that has been somewhat forgotten within the church today. Often we confess our sin, but rarely do we make restitution, doing whatever it takes to make up for the wrong that we have committed. It wasn't enough for this young man to say, Mom, you know what, I'm the one who did it. I took the 1,100 pieces of silver. I'm not giving it back, but I want you to know I'm the one who did it. Actually, he says, I'm the one who did it. And here are the 1,100 pieces of silver that I had taken. Restitution is actually a very solid biblical practice. And it's something that we have not talked enough about. If you have wronged another, you need to do whatever you can to make that wrong right. It's not enough to confess. We must also be willing to act in order to make things right. So, restitution is the one good thing that you get from this guy. So, what you end up with, and we read it already in verses 2 and 3, there is what I would refer to as a duplicitous act of worship. I want you to notice that within the conversation that takes place, on multiple occasions, the name of the Lord is presented. First, there is the statement, may the Lord bless you. That's from mom to the son. Basically, you've come clean, you've confessed, you've returned the silver. May the Lord bless you. And then a little bit later, you will have these pieces of silver dedicated to the Lord. You would look at this family immediately and think to yourselves, well, you know what, actually maybe they are God-fearing. Sure, this son has made some foolish choices, but here they are dedicating to the Lord, and they are seeking the Lord's blessing. It actually sounds pretty Christian to us. However, the mom then says that in honor of my son, I will take this silver, these 1,100 pieces of silver, and I will have an idol made. Now, right off the bat here, I have a problem, and God has a problem. See, we've already talked about at least 2 commandments that have been broken within this family. And remember, the commandments are actually given in the book of Exodus, and we're in Judges, which means they already got the law. And when Joshua called them to faithfully keep the law, and they said, far be it from us to serve any other God, he actually challenged them and told them that he is a jealous God, and that he will not tolerate when you turn away from those laws. That law had been given already. The second commandment tells us that thou shalt not make any graven images. So again, it may sound like they're being very spiritual, very Christian, very godly. But here they are, they're taking the silver, and they are using it to make an idol, something that God has forbidden them from doing. What you end up with is what I have labeled here as tainted worship. They are dedicating 1,100 pieces of silver. Did you catch how many pieces of silver are actually used for the idol, though? 200. Yet mom has declared that I will give all of this in dedication and honor of my son, and we will make an idol, basically in honor of the Lord. 1,100 pieces of silver. Yet they used only 200 pieces of silver. I can't help but to think about something that happens in the book of Acts that's a little bit similar here. There's a couple. Their names are Ananias and Sapphira. And Ananias basically comes before Peter and he says, I have sold a piece of property. And this is the price that we paid, or we were paid for the property. And I feel like the Lord has told me to give this to the Lord. So he gives the money to Peter. And Peter immediately calls him out. This is not the price you paid. Actually, you are robbing God. You are lying. It wasn't the fact that they had money sitting in their savings. The issue was they were claiming one thing and then not backing it up. They were actually lying to the Lord. Ananias is struck down there in front of Peter. A little bit later, his wife comes in. Apparently, she wasn't present at that moment. She comes in and Peter says to her, is this the price that y'all paid for the property? Peter already knows the right answer. He knew it with Ananias. She says, oh yeah, it's exactly what we paid. And then Peter tells her, behold the feet of those who carried off your husband. They're coming to carry you off too. And she is struck down and killed as well. Basically, you have individuals who they are claiming to be giving everything, but they're not really giving everything. And here you have this mother who has declared, I will give 1,100 pieces of silver, yet she doesn't even give a fifth of those 1,100 pieces of silver to the Lord. That's a tainted act of worship. Beyond that, what ends up happening is this son, Micah, will then begin to basically set up this idol, and he sets up his own son, the son of an ungodly man, to become the priest, managing the worship of this false idol. I want to point out, first of all, that this is an imitation of the real thing. The people of Israel had been given a land, and they were told very specifically how to do certain things. There was a place where the people were to come to worship, to offer sacrifices, to come before the Lord, and it was in a place called Shiloh. They were not to make any other altars. You remember when the 2.5 tribes of Israel started to go back across the other side of the Jordan, and as they were going across the other side of the Jordan, they decided to set up a memorial. And it looked just like an altar. And the people of Israel said, we cannot tolerate that. And they prepared to go to war against them because they knew that God would not tolerate it. Why? Because they knew that there was really only one place that they were supposed to come to worship. Yet here, Micah and his mom and now his son are going to establish their own place of worship. And in many ways, it becomes an imitation of the real thing that took place in Shiloh. Now, there's no mention of an altar. There's no mention of any type of sacrifice. It doesn't mention burning incense. But because everything else seems very much a mirror image of what was taking place in Shiloh, it is likely that all of those very same things were taking place. Now, some theologians would say, well, maybe they were just using this as an opportunity to come before the Lord and ask for blessing. So they weren't really offering sacrifices, and therefore this may be okay. But this is not the way God instructed them to do it. Now, I told you a moment ago that in the judges, we see individuals who are spirit-filled, who are stepping up to the plate. But God longs for people to be more than just spirit-filled, spirit-driven. He wants them to be obedient. And what we see here is a people who they may want to look spiritual, but the truth is they are disobedient. They are not doing things the way God intended them to do it. So what I read to you in verse 6, in those days Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. And what we see here is basically a word of reasoning. This is a bridge of how we got where we are here. It's because we didn't have someone to say no. We didn't have someone to hold them accountable. We didn't have someone to step up and say, if you do this, I will punish you. And what happens is everybody just decides what they think is right. It's also a bit of an explanation as to what is about to take place. You see, everything in the first 6 verses is really setting the stage for even more corruption to come. But it's because in those days Israel had no king, and all the people simply did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. So beginning in verse 7, we are introduced to a Levite from Bethlehem with no place to call home. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read all of chapter 17 with you tonight. I'm not going to read any of chapter 18. We're just going to talk about it. But I want to begin reading here in verse 7 with you. Again, we're in chapter 17. This is what it says. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him. And the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." So, again, they've already started off on the wrong foot, because all of this is basically began with sin. You've got an individual who is greedy. You've got an individual who has dishonored his mother. You've got an individual who has stolen. You've got an individual who has been involved with fashioning an idol for worship. Everything has started off on the wrong foot. Now, imagine being this guy. You're now trying to be spiritual. You're trying to do things the right way, knowing that you haven't done things the right way yet, and a Levite from Bethlehem shows up with no place to call home. It would seem that this Levite is just passing through, and it seems somewhat random, but maybe it's not really quite as random. The question I would begin with is, why does this man not have a home? He lived in Bethlehem previously. He's from Judah. Bethlehem is one of the towns within Judah. Why does he not have a home? Is it possible that he made the choice to leave? Maybe he was dissatisfied with some of the things that were taking place. Maybe he wasn't being taken care of as well as the Levites should have been taken care of. Deuteronomy actually tells the Israelites that they are to take care of the Levites, and Deuteronomy 31 very clearly explains that to them. It's possible that he was simply dissatisfied with that and decided, you know what, I'm not sticking around. I'll go somewhere else where I'm appreciated. By the way, when he gets to this house, Micah offers him 10 shekels of silver a year and clothes and food and a place to stay, apparently. So maybe it is a financial thing, except I would suggest to you that the Levites generally got paid much more than this. He settles for it. Maybe he didn't leave by choice, although maybe it was because of his own choices. Another possibility is that this Levite left because of the fact that he had basically been asked to leave. Because he wasn't leading the way that he was supposed to, because he wasn't doing things according to what the law instructed. And perhaps he was basically asked to leave because of that. Or there's one other possibility. It is possible that as he left because he saw no purpose in what they were doing. Now here's the thing. If the people of Israel were already beginning to allow sin to come in, if the people of Israel were already allowing things to take place that did not fit with what, isn't that a beautiful sound when it's been 98 degrees? If the people of Israel were already beginning to yield on the things that God instructed, maybe he's dissatisfied, asking the question, why are we doing this? It's not like we're calling people to move forward. Why are we even here? What we see here is a tainted, I told you tainted worship earlier. We also have a tainted priest. And I say that because the very first thing that he does after agreeing to the terms, after accepting the offer of a job, is he begins to basically offer sacrifices to idols. It actually talked about household gods there as well. So it was not just this image of silver that was made with 200 shekels of silver, but rather this was apparently a place where people came to worship. I told you maybe this was not a random thing that he ends up at the house of Micah. Is it possible that there was a reputation already associated with Micah? He's got a priest. It was actually his son. Perhaps his oldest son who could kind of represent this family before the Lord. And the dad has decided, you know what, you can handle this. And word begins to spread throughout the community that Micah has a place where people can come and they can actually inquire of the Lord as to what ought to take place. Seek the Lord's blessing. Is it possible that this priest actually knew where he was going and knew what he was looking for? I would suggest to you that it is quite likely. What I find so intriguing, though, is this also becomes, and this is so important as I look at young people, this becomes more than just a job for him. This becomes a place to belong. He is embraced by Micah and his family. He says, you will become like a father. You will become like a priest to me, and I will treat you even like a son. When he says you will become like a father to me, he's talking about the respect that you will have. But when I treat you like a son, I will welcome you in. You will have a place to call home. And if he's been kicked out of somewhere else, if he's been rejected by others, yeah, I would love to have a place where I am welcomed and maybe even loved. Verse 13 actually gives us a presumption of blessing. As the father, as Micah brings this priest into the home, there is this idea that perhaps now the Lord will bless. What an ironic thought that he has. What do you think about this? God might bless now because I've got a Levite from Bethlehem administering the sacrifice. God might bless because I was able to lead that Levite astray so that now he's worshiping in front of idols. But now the Lord might bless me even more. Seems a little bit unlikely, doesn't it? The Lord will bless you because you've led others astray? An important idea here is that being religious does not make you godly. There are plenty of people in our world today who, if you ask them about their relationship with the Lord, they'll tell you, well, I'm not really a Christian, but, I'm a religious person, or I'm not a religious person, and there are all these different ideas, and we try to change terms around a little bit, and it's like I can be religious without necessarily being godly. This man was apparently religious, but clearly he's not godly. Being religious does not necessarily equal godliness. There's an incorrect presumption of the Lord's blessing upon him. And when we get to chapter 18, you see that specifically because Micah, the guy who stole from his mom, the guy who disrespected her, the one who helped make this sacrifice, who has now led another astray, he will have everything taken from him. The Lord did not give blessing in the midst of this. So again, I told you I would not read the entirety of chapter 18, but I do want to summarize bits and pieces of it here in chapter 18. But before we get into all of the other things that are associated with this, let me begin by just pointing out that there is a fitting price that is paid within this story. Again, how many pieces of silver were stolen in our passage here tonight? 1,100 pieces of silver. How many pieces of silver were used to betray Samson? There were 1,100 pieces of silver that were given from each of the Philistine rulers. Now guess what tribe Samson was from? He's from the tribe of Dan. Why does that matter? Because as we look at chapter 18, we see that it is the tribe of Dan that will actually be impacted by what was happening here with Micah and this act of sin. What will end up happening is you have a group of people, the Danites, that they have basically been pursuing land. Now, consider this. They have no place to call home, according to verse 1. Yet had God not provided a home for each of the tribes of Israel? Had God not divided the land up, giving each one a place to call their own? We know that they did, and there were occasions that individuals came back to Joshua and said, well, we haven't taken all of the land, but we need more land. And he would basically call them out, well, why haven't you taken the land over here yet? If you'd have finished what you had, you'd have plenty. But here Dan is, the tribe of Dan, and they are looking for more land because they apparently don't have what they need. Actually, it's an interesting thing. The tribe of Dan, according to the statistical numbers that are given when the allotment of land is given, there were 64,000 people from the tribe of Dan. We're going to be introduced to 600 of them who will actually go and fight. So less than 1/100th of them that will actually go and fight, which means the tribe of Dan still had their land, but there were those who were simply not satisfied. They will actually go in pursuit of a place called Laish. And it is a land that is very far from Dan. It's actually on the very northern tip of what is known as the Promised Land. It's not completely outside of the Promised Land, but it is very far away from where the tribe of Dan was. In fact, in your little handouts that you got tonight, I intentionally put the map of the Promised Land on there for you. And if you will look, I know that it's kind of small print, so maybe it takes a little bit to be able to see some of this. But on the left side of that picture, you've got a body of water, and you can see Judah's kind of right in the middle of the map. Just to the left of there, you see Dan. And Dan's land is basically from there, there's actually a loop that goes around it, and it borders the Mediterranean Sea. Now I want you to take a peek at something else. Moving all the way up to the very top of this map, you see Manasseh on the right side, and then you see Asher on the left side. Go further up, and there's another spot there, and it's labeled Dan. That is Laish. So what that tells me is the people of Dan weren't going to their next door neighbor, but rather they have decided they want to go somewhere else to be able to find land, something that is easier and something that they can call their own. Now, I will tell you, not far, I say not far, not too far from where Dan is, you will see Sidon. It's actually one of the coastal cities, and it would have been over Asher, up a little bit higher from where Asher is. The town of Laish would have actually been a part of the Sidonian kingdom. So anyways, back to the people of Dan. They have what appears to be a not-so-chance encounter with the people of Micah and this priest who is leading worship in his home. I would suggest to you that these individuals traveling from the tribe of Dan did not randomly come upon the household of Micah. They go to this house and they begin to seek the blessing of God. Now, as they do so, again, it is likely that people knew that Micah had his own household gods. Look back at this map again. You have Dan here. You may not be able to see it quite as clearly, but between Dan and then the next Dan, you have a place called Shiloh, which means that they could have gone through Shiloh, which means they would have been able to inquire at the house of the Lord, the place where the people of Israel had been told to go and inquire of the Lord. Yet they chose to go in a different route so they could go by the house of Micah. I suggest to you that this was not a random crossing of paths, but rather they came seeking counsel and blessing from the Lord. But the Lord had already given them land. If they'd have gone to Shiloh, you know the response they would have gotten? The same response that Joshua gave. You've already received your land. I'm not going to give you more. So they chose a different route. What they end up doing is finding a Levite along the way who is willing to give them the blessing that they are looking for, but without accountability. There is no calling out of, you people have gone the wrong way. You've chosen to do things that you're not supposed to do, but rather he tells them, go and the Lord will bless you. What they get is what their itching ears are wanting to hear. It's actually something that the New Testament talks about, where often what happens is people will begin to surround themselves with people who will say what they want them to say. Tell me how good it's going to be for me. I've been reading in the book of Jeremiah recently, and as I've been looking at the words that he spoke, and sometimes he's referred to as the weeping prophet, because it seems like every time he brought a message, it was a harsh message. In the passage that I was reading earlier this week, it was actually saying that as he is giving that message, the chief priest hears him bringing the message, and he has him arrested and flogged and beaten and basically held until the next morning. And nobody wants to hear the message that Jeremiah is offering. They want to hear the message that the chief priest is offering, because he was telling them all of the good things. The truth is, sometimes we need to hear those hard truths more than we just need to hear how good things are going to be. And on this occasion, these individuals from Dan actually needed correction, but they chose a different route so that they would not have to basically hear the hard truth. Actually, they find a Levite with no accountability. They get what their itching ears want to hear, and then we actually see, now I'm skipping way down. That was actually verse 5 and 6, where they get what their itching ears want to hear. Skipping down to verse 19 and 20, if you were to look, we find the betraying Levite, the one who has chosen to go on his own path that is different from the way God has instructed. The betraying Levite actually betrays again. What will end up happening is, as this Levite tells the people of Dan, yeah, go check it out. And of course they go and they check it out. And they come back and they decide, yeah, we can take this land. It's beautiful. It's everything we wanted. And they come back with their 600 soldiers, individuals who are going to take possession of the land. They stop at the house of Micah again. And as they do so, it's almost like they engage this priest out at the gate of the household. And they talk with them for a while somebody else goes in and basically steals all the household gods. I do find that a little bit interesting because you have the thief being robbed again. But then the Levite says, what are you doing? And they tell him, don't say anything. Let's go. You get to come with us and you can be the priest with us. Wouldn't it be better to be the priest for an entire group of people as opposed to just one small family? And so he does. So this betraying priest betrays people yet again. As the robbery takes place, and it is a robbery that takes place, as they steal all of these household gods and the 200 shekels of silver that have been turned into this idol, immediately Micah realizes what's taken place. Not only Micah, it says those who lived near him, they also pursued and they came after these people from the tribe of Dan. And I almost have to laugh just a little bit in verses 25 and 26 as he begins to address them. What are you doing? What are you taking our stuff for? You're taking the silver and the gold. And their response is, you need to be careful what you say because there are some short-tempered men that might actually kill you and your family if you say that too loudly. Well, who are the short-tempered men? It's all of these very same people who are speaking to Micah and his family. And they basically, Micah looks and he says, there are too many of them, we cannot fight, and he gives up. It's interesting, the thief has now been robbed. The very same things that he stole from his mom, likely years earlier, they have now been stolen from him. They go and they take possession of the land. They experience what I would label as an easy battle. And as they get there, they recognize there is no need to call upon the Lord. Actually, I say that in verse 10, there is assumed that God's blessing will be with them. If you were to look at verse 10 of chapter 18, it actually talks about God's blessing being upon them, the Lord providing for them. But the reality is they go there and they find a people group that is too self-consumed to prepare for battle. They felt safe where they were. They didn't have to worry about closing the city gates. They were content. And maybe they figured the Sidonians would come to their rescue, but there was quite a distance between them and the Sidonians. So they are ill-prepared for battle. What's interesting about that is they are an ungodly people. They are doing things, they are partying, they are reveling in their sin. Yet they are on the outskirts of Israel. Surely God would not have allowed that to remain. You remember when the Lord allowed the people of Israel to come in and take possession of the land of Canaan? It wasn't because of how good the people of Israel were. It was because of how sinful the people of Canaan had been. Yet here this people group is, and they are living in sin and they are content with it, yet they feel no threat by the neighboring Israelites. I told you this is on the outskirts. This is at the very northern edge of what would be known as the Promised Land, which means you've got Israelites that are right around the next corner, yet these people aren't at all concerned about the people of Israel. Why? Because the people of Israel have already begun to become self-consumed as well. They're allowing sin to take place among them. They're allowing idolatry to take place among them. Who are they to hold the people of Laish accountable? There was no threat of accountability. So what happens is when the people of Dan come in, they basically face no battle. They come in and they take possession of the town, and they become basically the owners. They actually change the name of the place. It becomes known as Dan. That's why you see that name listed on that map. What happens is idol worship becomes a staple among the people of Israel until the moment that they will be taken into captivity, which means in this particular region, and again, remember, what tribe did Samson come from? The tribe of Dan. Which means if he came from the larger area of Dan that's in the south, or if he came from up here, what you end up with either way is a people group that they are okay with idol worship. Apparently, as they traveled up through, they didn't randomly go this other path away from Shiloh. They knew what they were doing. The people of Israel were beginning to allow idol worship to become a common staple among the people of Israel. And I found it interesting in verse 30, so the next to last verse of this chapter, it identifies a relationship that the priest would have there in Dan. His name is going to be Jonathan, and he is labeled as a son of Moses. Most theologians believe that obviously we're talking about Moses. That's a few generations that have passed, because you had Moses, then you had Joshua, and then basically another generation that has gone. This is likely a grandson or a great-grandson of Moses himself that will serve as the priest for idol worship among the people of Dan. How quickly things change when we take our eyes off of what God told us to put our eyes on. This is my challenge to you tonight. It is so easy for us to find ourselves wayward. The people of Dan had everything that they needed. The Lord blessed them. He called them to devotion. They committed to that devotion. Yet in just a generation, we see them already going off and doing the things that they know they're not supposed to do. We're not talking about, please don't misunderstand me, all sin is the same. But we're not talking about these guys just telling a little white lie. Oh, that was an accident. I didn't mean to say that. So that's okay, right? These guys are blatantly acting in disregard of at least 3 of the 10 commandments, just in what we read tonight. In other words, they knew better. But it's so easy when you take your eyes off of what it needs to be on. So easy to let compromise come in and destroy what God's doing. I assume everyone in here has a right relationship with the Lord. But I'm going to tell you, if you take your eyes off of Jesus, it is so easy to allow compromise to take place in your life. You cannot do it. Y'all have heard me quote it just because it's actually one of my favorite passages in Hebrews chapter 12. It tells us to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And we need to make sure that, there are going to be other things that happen. There are going to be distractions that come up, and there are going to be other things that other people say and other people do. But our eyes need to stay on Christ. And that way, we don't have to worry about that drift where we start doing things that do not fit with what he wants. All right. That's what I got for you tonight. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the examples that we have, even the ones that stink. In our passage tonight, there are people who made really poor choices. And there were consequences associated with it. Father, I pray that you would help us to stay focused on you so that that won't be our story. Help us to be a people who are led by the Spirit, but also who walk in obedience to you. Help us to live in such a way that basically the next generation will know that this is important to us because we're not willing to compromise. We want to honor you with everything. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for the rain that has fallen while we've been in here tonight. Be honored in us. Keep